Just like in real life, sometimes we can be exceptional in the most unexpected things. Maybe you're not the greatest storyteller. Maybe you can't tell a lie to save your life. Maybe you're horrible at disguises or convincing people of your point of view. But occasionally, just every once in a while, you have that one moment where you really sink your teeth into it and get your point across. This is kind of what we're going to talk about today. And this would be as a player, role playing in order to help with a difficulty class of a particular thing that you're trying to overcome. And as a GM, using role playing for DC to help bring that role playing out at the table. My name is Don. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. Before we jump into the details of how to use role playing for difficulty class, let's just quickly identify what a difficulty class is. So, if you are a player and you hear DC, it stands for difficulty class. And if you're new to Pathfinder 2nd Edition or new to tabletop role playing, you might not have heard the term before. So, in the game, the difficulty class represents the level of challenge or the difficulty of an action that a player character or an NPC must overcome in order to accomplish a certain task. Once again, be it lying, be it telling a story, any of those type of things have a difficulty class. And pretty much any time that you are rolling against something, you're rolling against the difficulty class. And it's either provided by the source material or the GM has had to come up with it in a DC subsystem that can range from very easy to nearly impossible. With that being defined, let's go ahead and move on to how you might be able to role play at your table in order to give yourself a bonus or maybe lower the DC of something in order to overcome it. Now, every table is going to be different, and really, you should only do what you're comfortable with at your table and what you've agreed upon as a table, as what the rules are. However, if you are a game master and you say to a player, okay, you want to pretend that you're a very important character, what do you say to them? Or if you're a player character and your GM says that to you, there's kind of a few different approaches you can take. You could say, well, I try to tell him that I am a big shot adventurer from 2 cities down. That's why you might not have heard me. Or you might go along the lines of, I am Borgard the Mighty, and I have slain many dragons, worms, goblins, gnomes, giants, and therefore I am shocked that you haven't heard of me. However, you will soon. Those are 2 different approaches to the same question. And the second one kind of gives a little bit more information, gives a little bit more of yourself, and tells the GM just how much bombast and just how much energy you're putting into trying to do this deception. And therefore, they might want to give you a little bonus or a little help in order to overachieve the DC, even if your roll wasn't quite up to snuff. Now, I'm not saying that this should totally negate the roll whatsoever, but as we hear many times in this game, every single +1, +2 that you get really matters in this game. And a lot of effort by the player characters or a lot of effort by the GM to draw it out of player characters can be rewarded. And it's kind of in this way that I think that you could use the difficulty class of an object in order to encourage role playing at your table if you are a game master, or if you're a player, maybe kind of bring that little element and see what your GM will do with it once you kind of go that particular route. You can take a simple question from the GM and handle it very seriously. Like if he says, well, the marshal of the town could look at you and ask you, well, why are you going so hard after these gnolls? And you could come up with a story and say, with tears coming down my face, the gnolls destroyed my family and village back in whatever town your character's possibly from. And I have set a vow to my god Desna that I will wipe gnolls off the face of the earth. Now, that might not actually make a lot of sense in the story. However, as people, we don't always make sense, nor do your players always make sense. And it is a little bit of extra flavor, a little bit of extra spice, a little bit of something that you can bring to the character, and you might just impress the GM. For a GM side of it, if you have a table where it's normally a little bit sedate, more rolls, more looking at the details and tactics of combat. And then all of a sudden, one of your players comes out with this long soliloquy about lost loves and tales of woe or tales of conquest. If that is something that you like, if it is something that surprises you and it's something you want to see more at the table, then go ahead and reward the player for that. However, let me tell you what I'm not talking about. Now, what I'm not talking about is there are certain, I will say, generally you see it more in feats than the other ones. So we'll cover some of the feats, but an exceptionally good role playing encounter shouldn't really take the place of a feat or a skill that the character should have if it's written in the rules that there is a defined set of circumstances or a defined feat that they could have taken in order to accomplish this. Really good role playing shouldn't overcome that. I'll cover a few here, and they're all just first level feats, so they're very common or can be very common. But the first one I'm going to cover is courtly graces. Courtly graces is if you're trained in society and what you're trying to do is you're trying to pretend that you are a noble simply because you have been around nobles your whole entire life. You have been raised around them and you've learned proper etiquette. Maybe you were a handmaid or a butler in a house. Maybe you were the stable boy or stable girl in a particular noble's family. Therefore, you know how they act. Well, you are trying to present yourself as a noble and to kind of get into the politics and the intrigue and the little games of influence that nobles do. That's a particular feat. Just because you are exceptionally good at role play, you should not get the advantage of using society to make an impression on a noble just simply because you did good role play. However, that doesn't mean you can't do it. We can all lie and we can all pretend in real life, but the DC would be exceptionally difficult. Where if you have courtly graces, then you are using a better skill for yourself in order to overcome it. So the GM shouldn't necessarily allow you to use society simply because you did good role play. However, they might give you a +1 to your roll simply because you did it so well. Another quick one that I can think of with quick in the title is called quick coercion. And it is if you are trained in intimidation. And what it is you can bully others with just a few choice little quips, little implications that you can throw at them. And you can coerce a creature after one round instead of a full minute. Just because you were exceptional at telling the GM how you bullied this particular creature doesn't mean that it should happen immediately. What they could do is they could lower it a bit, the amount of time, maybe instead of one round, which is only 6 seconds, they could maybe lower it to 45 seconds instead of a minute or 30 seconds instead of a minute. And the quick coercion feat does not allow you to coerce someone in the midst of combat, even so, or without engaging in conversation. So your very good role playing shouldn't really overcome that either if there is already a feat that can't do it. But giving a +1 to the roll that the person tries to do could give them a little bit of an advantage, or maybe taking down the 1 minute down to, instead of 10 rounds, maybe make it 7 rounds. Another one that would come up that's a little bit different is I'm going to say we're going to use impressive performance. In impressive performance, you are basically trained in performance. So think of your bards would be the ones who could really benefit from something like this. But what you can do with impressive performance is when you are trying to make an impression, you use performance instead of diplomacy. Well, if it was that specific, let's say a bard, then they probably should have taken the feat. So I would not personally let a player, because of exceptional role play, heck, maybe they bring out a harp or a guitar or a lute and start playing live at the table. Still, I would not allow them to use their performance instead of diplomacy. However, you could give them a +1 or a +2 in order to do it, maybe lower the DC, but it isn't something that you should probably substitute for something that already exists in the game. But a little bit of edge doesn't hurt. Now, I hope you like this little role-playing idea. Once again, these are role-playing ideas, so none of these are really going to be rules as written. So these are just things that I like to do or I like to see when I'm playing at a table, but they aren't rules. And these are totally optional. It isn't necessarily something that you would see at every single table. However, they're kind of fun. They bring out a little bit more out of the table if that is the way you like to play. But I do hope you like this video. And if you did, feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.